Hi everybody, Rad Mom here. I'm just popping in real quick before the new year to say thank you so much for all the support this year. It's been an amazing year here on the channel, and I think that the work we're doing here is so important. I really do, because, well, I am a mom, you know, and I've seen and heard some of the stuff that my own kids have brought home in the last several years. So I saw this one coming. I actually found this young woman.
Everybody, my name is Ash. Some of you might know me from TikTok, where I am at Ashton Eskridge, or you might just be finding me on YouTube for the first time. This is my first ever YouTube video, and for those of you who don't know, I'm a detransitioner.
She has fled from TikTok because they were so mean to her over there. She's not even 17. And she's already gone this full cycle through the trans community. And, you know, where she's come out at the moment is sort of terrifying from where I'm sitting. Because it looks like she's got this whole other journey waiting for her. And she's going to need us. So let's take a look.
A while back, I posted a video on my TikTok explaining the story of my transition and detransition, and that has absolutely blown up. I have gotten so much attention to that video. I've gotten reached out to by so many news companies and all of these amazing people on the internet, like Blair White, Owens Men, Chloe Cole, etc. It's just been amazing.
So, point of order, she just named a bunch of conservative YouTubers.
And I've decided to switch my main platform over from TikTok to YouTube, just because everyone on TikTok is so incredibly hateful, and it was so draining for me to continue making content on there when everyone was just so hateful toward me. So I've decided to just try it out on here, see if things go better on here, because I do want to continue making content and continue using my story to help people.
This is how she is processing what has happened to her, and this experience that she's been through is by trying to make it mean something, which is so relatable, right? And that is so healthy, I think. This is a very intelligent young woman. And I think initially that was what got her into trouble, actually.
Growing up, I was always a really feminine kid. I loved being a girl and everything about it. I was so happy with being a girl. No issues with myself. When I hit puberty, that didn't bother me at all. Of course, it was uncomfortable as far as physically, but I never felt like I was going through the wrong puberty. It just felt like, ugh, what's happening? Yeah, you know, that's just kind of how you feel when you're going through puberty. And when I was 13, started to struggle a lot with my mental health. I was really depressed and I was really lost. And it was around this time that COVID hit and everything was locked down. Everyone was forced to stay inside their houses.
Whoa, okay, this is where I stopped. And really just had to sit back and take a long think about this one. Because, so wait a minute. This whole story has taken place in the last 3 years. This person is still only 16 years old. And, you know, 13, it's really common for young girls to go through a period of depression around 13. Because, well, you get a flood of estrogen and stuff at that age. And those kind of things. Like, we all know how your cycle can affect your mood. So, yeah, that's actually really common. I think a lot of us went through that, if you think back, right? And there are a lot of us that, yeah, it kind of sets you off on this weird trajectory because your first moment of, like, adult consciousness is shaded darkly, right? And that can really mess with your head.
And I was just really isolated from any friends that I had. I was really isolated from the outside world. I really didn't leave my house because we weren't supposed to.
Middle school, in the time of COVID, like I can't even hardly fathom how awful middle school was anyway. Add to it all of that. I had a couple that age and I watched them struggle. Okay, I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. She is right in between my two older ones we have living at home right now. So obviously my heart goes out to her. I don't want to ask where her parents were. She mentions them many times. Apparently she browbeat them and guilt-tripped them into all of this. I feel for this girl.
I spent a lot of my time on TikTok, on Discord and just watching anime, because I was kind of a weird 13-year-old. And these people on TikTok were posting all of this content about documenting their transition and how happy it made them, all their medical transition, everything to do with their transition. And I saw all of these videos on my feed because it's just being forced down your throat. And I feel like that's exactly what happened with a lot of the other trans kids that are out there on the internet right now. It's just being shoved down their throat by the algorithm because that's what they want.
And you know what she didn't run into on TikTok? Us. Clearly. So that gives me a little bit of pause. These things are tilted against us, aren't they? And she still hasn't found us, obviously. She's gone from, as we'll see, the liberal side to the conservative side, okay? Because she's still living in this paradigm of that false dichotomy, right? Which is so sad and scary. And that's where I'm going with this.
So I saw all of these videos and I decided that I was non-binary, and I changed my name from Ashton to Gray. Started going by they, them, and I shaved my hair off, like just clean buzz cut, all of it off. It was so bad. I watched a lot of trans YouTubers, such as Jamie Rains, no offense, Sam Collins, and I got all of this information on being trans, and I just went down this huge rabbit hole of watching like every video on these guys' channels. And that's when I decided that I wanted to just be full-on trans man, not just non-binary. I started going by Gray Sin instead of just Gray.
So why am I worried about Jamie Rains? Why do I worry about people like Jamie Dodger? That's why. Because this is exactly what they say they're not doing.
I told my family and they were really confused by it. They just didn't think it was what was right for me because, of course, when I was growing up, I was always really feminine. I never had any issue with it. They saw no warning signs in my childhood. They questioned me a lot, but I was just really defiant and I shut down every question that they asked me. I didn't allow them to try and help me because I assumed that they were just being transphobic toward me. I labeled them as transphobic when they really were just trying to understand what was going on with their kid. This caused quite a rift in our relationship for a really long time, simply because I was like, oh god, they're transphobic, when they were really just confused and trying to make sense of something that was really confusing to them.
The level of maturity here is amazing to me. That tone in her voice of how long ago this was, that's subjective.
After about, like, I'd say 3-4 months, they came around to it. They started using the right pronouns for me, the right name for me. And from that point on, they were just super supportive, although they were still confused by it, of course. I got a binder, started binding my chest, which was really uncomfortable. It was really hard to breathe. I was constantly, like, hyper aware of what does my chest look like. I vividly remember at, like, 14, I went out and I like just watched the guys. I watched the men that were just going about their business, and I mirrored every behavior that I saw in them, like the way that they stood, the way they held themselves, the way they walked, the way they sat, the mannerisms they had, the language that they used. I adopted a bunch of more like masculine words into my vocabulary.
This is super relatable to me. I did this kind of shit too. And this is a level of self-consciousness that is unhealthy for anyone, but especially at that formative age. The level of self-consciousness at that age, I think, is just painful for everyone, because again, you're just sort of beginning to sort of wake up to what your adult mind might look like. Add to that trying to be something you're not.
And it really just became an acting gig at that point, because whenever I would go out in public, whenever I would hang out with people or talk to people, I was so focused on how I was holding myself, and if I was holding myself in a masculine manner, if I was saying things that were masculine, if I was passing as a male. And that took a lot of my energy. And by the end of every day, I was pretty much just exhausted from putting up this facade of male, because I really wanted to pass in society.
It's completely true. It's exhausting.
That's something that I was super focused on, just pass. I needed to be a man. I wanted to trick people into thinking that I was born that way.
Wanted to live in denial.
So I went stealth. I tried really hard to be stealth and not let anyone find out that I was born a female. And surprisingly, it worked. And because of that, it was even more draining, because I had to put up the facade that I was born a man, not even just trying to be a man. I had to be a man. And it was just exhausting. It was an act. All it was an act. And I feel like that's the same with a lot of the trans youth today. It's all an act, because of course I believe in the existence of actual transgender people. I think that they do exist, but it's a very, very small minority of people.
Based on what, though? Because they say so? Having been a member of the trans community for 3+ years, you should have some reason for thinking that. Other than you don't want to just write off the whole idea. You're just not ready to do that yet.
And in the current climate today, it is such a TikTok trend. I'd say maybe like 1% of the people who are identifying as transgender on TikTok are actually trans.
That is a frighteningly low number, based on the drastic interventions that you described for us here. But, like, based on what do you say that?
It's a very small percentage of them, and it's such a huge trend that has just, like, swept the app. And it's a huge issue, because it's not a harmless trend. It's damaging children, it's sterilizing children, it's ruining their bodies for the rest of their lives. And it's a harmful trend to just affirm it.
So this is a 16-year-old former devotee saying this, which is kind of refreshing. You know, this is not somebody who could be argued as being out of touch.
I thought that I wasn't happy because I wasn't male enough, so I wanted to get more male. I wanted to go through, like, the changes that testosterone would cause, and I guilt-tripped them to no end. I begged and begged and pestered and pestered, and eventually they set up an appointment with doctors just to get a little consultation. And of course, these doctors, yet again, guilt-tripped my parents. So my parents eventually agreed to it, and they signed the consent forms, and I started testosterone when I was, I think I had just barely turned 16, and I think it's wild how easily accessible those hormones were to me, because how my experience getting my prescription went was I waited for 3 months to get my appointment, and then when I went to the appointment, I talked with the doctor. I went through a little questionnaire, a little pamphlet of what changes the testosterone would cause, and then I was required to talk to the little in-house counselor, like, the same day. I talked with her, but the thing is, she never really asked me any questions about my gender identity. She of course asked me, like, what are your pronouns? What's your preferred name? But then she kind of just went into, how are you doing in school? What's your life like? What are your friends like? It was like a standard therapy appointment that had nothing to do with gender at all.
And this is that loophole in action, right? Where, oh yeah, sure, they'll have you talk with the in-house therapist who is literally only there so they can say you talked to the in-house therapist.
As she was talking with me, she was also, like, simultaneously typing out the recommendation letter, as if she was just immediately intending to do it without ever, like, confirming that I was actually transgender.
Ah, there's the rub. How exactly would she have done that? How exactly was that therapist supposed to confirm that you were transgender?
So I got that recommendation letter from this therapist that I'd spoken to for maybe like 30 minutes. She knew nothing about me. She didn't ask me much about my actual gender. And then I was given my prescription and I was on my merry little way, and I was able to start testosterone like the next day. It was so insanely quick and so insanely, like, nothing was done to make sure I was actually trans. And I think that that was just the most, like, terrible way you could have ever gone about prescribing these hormones. And I don't think that they're going to, like, change that anytime soon.
No, they're not going to change it. And I think that, you know, illustrates exactly what a real grift this actually is, because there is no proper practice. There is no right practice. There's no right way to do this.
It's insane to me. It's crazy. It's demented, the way that they are just handing out these hormones to minors. I was 16 years old.
Right, but they need trans kids. Go ask Jamie Dodger.
I still am 16 years old. I'll be 17 in a month. So the changes that the testosterone caused to me, of course, are my voice dropping. I'm currently, for this whole video, I've been raising my voice up. This is what my voice sounds like if I weren't raising it up at all. It's kind of raised quite a bit since getting off of testosterone. It used to be much deeper. But of course, it's still deeper than it was originally. It's much deeper than it was before I started testosterone. It caused me to grow, like, facial hair. I still have to shave that off. It caused my face to become more angular, my jawline to become more defined, and it caused a lot more body hair growth, which I already had fairly thick body hair before I started testosterone, but once I started it, it got, like, insane. I was hairier than most of the biological males that I knew in my life.
Being a 17-year-old girl is kind of a nightmare anyway. keep this one in your thoughts. All right. She already said at the beginning that she's, gotten involved with a lot of the conservative YouTubers and stuff. And, we still haven't dealt with the rejection of ourselves. Looking back, right? Now we're just rejecting that part too, it seems to me. And we still haven't dealt with whatever internalized misogyny or whatever the fuck it was that led us down this path in the first place. Right? But now we're going to hop to the conservative side and start learning about those politics. Because that's a safe environment to explore womanhood.
It caused my appetite to go up quite a bit, my libido to go up quite a bit. Of course, the bottom growth that it induces took place. My hair got quite a bit thinner, but that has luckily filled back in quite a bit. Caused me to grow hair in places I never had hair before. Like, I get chest hair, I get stomach hair, I get back hair, I get freaking toe hair. It's just everywhere.
Like, your emotional processing of something will lag behind your intellectual processing of something, right? You can understand something all you want. That doesn't mean it's actually sunk in, does it? She was talking about being a woman earlier. It's like, honey, you're still a girl. You got almost a decade before your brain even stops maturing, okay?
And who knows about my fertility? There's a good chance I can't have children. Hopefully I can, but I have no idea. It stopped my periods. They have luckily came back since getting off of testosterone. But they're much more irregular, and I'm not really sure if I'm still, fertile. I don't know yet.
And you can't say she's a creep for worrying about it, because this is her own body that she's talking about here. I hate this question so much. Why are you worried about their fertility? Why aren't they? Is the question.
And the reason that I got on testosterone was because I thought that those changes would make me feel better about myself. But in all actuality, they really made me feel worse about myself. That's kind of when I started to realize that I was wrong. But I was really, really terrified to ever come out about it, because I've seen detransitioners online before, and the way that people react to it is terrible. The backlash that they face is insane. And of course, it's so embarrassing to live 3 years of your life as one thing and convincing everyone in your life that this is who I am, this is what's right for me. And of course, they're going to tell you, no, it's not. And then eventually you're going to have to be like, oh shit, yeah, you were right the whole time. That's humiliating. Detransitioning is humiliating.
Which, especially as a teenager, is extra humiliating, right? And that is what makes this young woman so incredibly brave. And why I frankly believe every word that she says. Because why on earth would you go on as a barely 17-year-old girl and say all of this? How terrifying. But to have gone through it, much less than to talk about it in public, because she's trying to make some meaning out of this.
People say, oh, it's so much easier to detransition than it is to transition. It was easier for me to transition in the first place than it was for me to detransition. And that's the case for every other detransitioner I've spoken to.
Wow, there's something wrong there.
It's easier to transition in the first place than it is to detransition, because society has been trained to accept transgender people, but once they come out and are like, I was wrong, they bash them, they shame them. They absolutely excommunicate them from the community that was once so supportive and accepting. The accepting and supportive transgender community just cuts you off. They don't care about you anymore. You're nothing to them.
Because it's all an illusion. And if you question it, well, then you have to be expelled. Because you might burst the bubble. You might break the spell.
In fact, they hate you, and they're gonna hate on you all day long. Accepting of everyone, my fucking ass, transgender community.
All right, so this girl has just obviously been quite traumatized by this. Who wouldn't be? To have been turned on by your entire larger community that is the human nightmare.
And when I was living as a male still, I had fairly long hair. It was down to maybe here-ish, just because I liked having long hair, because it made me feel more like myself, like I had a little bit of myself still within me.
Oh my gosh, that's so sad, right?
Even if I was changing everything else about myself, I still had my pretty hair. And when I started to realize that I was wrong, I really didn't want to be wrong, so I tried to push myself back into that box of being a man. So I as one final grasp at my identity. It was one final, like, I'm right, this is who I am, I can't be wrong about this. I cut all my hair off. I finally made the decision that I really needed to do this because I had a dream where I was living as a girl again, and I was just so much happier in it. I woke up, I was like, oh my god, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep living this lie.
So when you push something into your unconscious, eventually it is going to bubble back up on you. That sounds about right.
So I woke up, I painted my nails, did my eyeliner, and I told a few of my close friends. And then once my parents woke up that morning, I told them too.
So did you notice that? She told her friends first and then her parents. Simply because she could reach her friends instantly. And her parents were asleep. Down the hall. You know. I'm not saying that, like, they got caught sleeping. But, like, this is just a difference in perspective. Okay, for somebody as young as this, who's grown up in this environment, which is legitimately different from the one that someone my age might have grown up in. And this is one of the ways. I couldn't have got hold of all of my friends so before I managed to talk to my parents about something early in the morning. Like, that just wouldn't have happened.
The absolute backlash that I faced when I originally came out as a detransitioner was crazy. All of the trans people that were in my life just suddenly didn't want anything to do with me anymore. I lost a lot of my friends. I'm having to live with the permanent effects that testosterone has had on my body. I always have more body hair. The main one that bugs me is my voice. My voice is always going to be lower than it was before.
And the matter-of-fact way that she's talking about this is part of what makes me think that maybe the emotional processing aspect of this is yet to come.
Not to mention the absolute mental damage that transitioning has caused me. It has just kind of wrecked my perception of myself, and I feel like I missed out on like 3 years of my life. I missed out on 3 years of living my teenage girlhood, and it makes me so upset, and it just gets to me on a whole nother level. Like, if you haven't been through it, you don't understand the grief that you go through when you're a detransitioner.
And grief is the kind of thing that tends to happen in phases, in stages, right? Who's going to be the ones around while she's going through this grieving process for her girl self?
When I first detransitioned, I was able to find maybe like 3 detransitioners that were open about their story, and I decided that I wanted to be able to use my story to help other people like me, because I knew that there were so many people out there who were like me that just didn't have the resources to like learn about detransitioning and that it's a thing that you can do.
This is literally the same reason that I started my channel. I looked out there and I didn't really see a whole lot of people like me on the media landscape, so I went for it. Totally relatable. Thank you for sharing your story, Nadine. Sincerely. This is brave stuff, and I do, though, I feel like, you know, you're so smart that your mind tends to get ahead of the rest of you, which I also find very relatable.
So I decided to post my story to TikTok, and that video blew up. It has over 2 million views, but people in the comments were just terrible. But the thing is, it's so distinctly different, the reaction I got from people under the age of 16 and above the age of 16 and like older generations. Below the age of 16, it was just all hatred, all like shunning me from any community.
Those are her peers, though, because she is 16. So these are her peers who are overwhelmingly pummeling her with hatred.
And just hating on me for being wrong about myself. And calling me a transphobe when I've done nothing but share my own story on the internet.
Well, you disagree with them, so you're a transphobe. That's the logic. That's the sum total of the logic. What do you want? Like, you... There's no more to it than that. You know this.
And people above, like, 16 who have, like, lived their lives and, like, know how to think about things critically, they all were so accepting of me. People above the age of, like, 30 are just, like, reaching out to me, like, telling me how, like, brave I am and just being so kind to me.
It's almost as if, as you get a little older, you start to realize that when you're 16, you really don't know as much as you think you do. Getting older is a humbling experience.
And I feel like I've been able to help quite a few people. It makes me so happy that I'm making a difference in this world with my story. And the hate that I received from the trans community and the left for my detransition has made my, like, political ideology completely flip from being fairly liberal to being pretty damn conservative at this point in time.
Okay, and I'm going to say this one more time. If people who call themselves liberals are acting fashy, those are not liberals. That's not what that is.
My whole worldview has just flipped to be much more conservative than it used to be.
But so did you hear that? The trans community utterly rejected her, so now her entire worldview is up in the air, and she's landed in a much more conservative place, which again, trauma will do that to you. Okay? And the conservative community, the conservative media landscape is where she's going to be working through whatever it is that got her there in the first place. That's the environment in which she's going to be exploring womanhood. I'm terrified that's not going to go very well.
And before all of this happened, I was all for transitioning minors. I thought like, oh, it saves their lives. It doesn't. It ruins their lives, especially because it is a TikTok trend right now. Maybe like 10 years ago, I would have been like, okay, the trans kids who are out right now probably actually know what they're talking about because they haven't been force-fed this shit down their throat by TikTok.
Okay, no. Checking in as a trans kid from the 90s, you still don't know what you're talking about. It's still not really a thing.
But now it's a TikTok trend. And now we know that these kids are going to change their minds. So why would we want to permanently damage their bodies when we know damn well that it's a TikTok trend?
Because there is no proper way to do this. There is no right practice to switch to.
So I am completely against transitioning minors. I don't think it's okay at all. And I don't care what people say about that. People are like, oh, you're a transphobe. No, I care about the fucking safety of children. I care about not castrating children. Doctors are so afraid of being labeled as transphobic and like being sued for it that they're just going to affirm and do no digging, no questioning when somebody comes to them and says, I'm trans, I want hormones.
What are they supposed to be digging for? What questions should they be asking? As far as I know, there is absolutely no way to materially measure whether someone is trans or not, other than to wait and see, which I feel like we could do without hormones and surgery.
They don't want to be labeled a transphobe, so all they're going to do is be like, oh yes, you are trans. This is the next step for you. This is what we're going to do to help you be more secure in your identity. They're never going to sit down and be like, what is the root cause of this gender dysphoria? Are you following a trend? There's all of these warning signs. They're never going to sit down and dig for the root cause.
Following a trend would not be the root cause. Why would you follow a trend like that? Only a certain sort of person is going to be susceptible to a trend like that. And I'm one of them, so obviously no judgment here. But that's not the root cause. The trend is not the problem. Your response to it is what you should be looking at.
Because they don't want to be labeled as transphobic. Because everything is transphobic.
Everything is transphobic. Because reality is transphobic.
Another huge reason that they're never going to question you is because they want your money.
Ding, 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 ding. There it is. It's like we live in a society that's obsessed with capitalism or something.
This is like you are becoming a cash cow to them when you go in and say that you want testosterone or estrogen or whatever you may be going in there for, puberty blockers, surgery, whatever. You are just going to be giving them money for life. That's all they want. They don't care about you as a person. You're doctors. They don't care. They don't give a shit about you.
What a horribly cynical thing for a 16-year-old girl to believe. And you see exactly why she would generalize like that. Because she was let down entirely by the medical community on this one.
The route of only ever affirming a trans person's identity is going to miss anyone else who may have any underlying causes. And it's going to lead to so many people being misdiagnosed with gender dysphoria and having their bodies fucking destroyed. It effectively ignores any other possibility and just misdiagnoses you with gender dysphoria and allows you to permanently alter your body. If we were to go on a route where therapy was required for like a year before even considering hormones, and you were forced to dig into all of the possible root causes that could be making you feel this way, we wouldn't have an issue.
I don't know. I feel like that story's out there too. I don't know that I've heard exactly that, but I feel like that story's probably out there too, where somebody's been in therapy for ages and then decided they were still trans anyway and then changed their mind later. the length of time you're in therapy before you decide to do all this unnecessary stuff to yourself is really beside the point.
There wouldn't be kids getting on hormones and then detransitioning and regretting everything. There wouldn't be kids getting surgeries and having their bodies mutilated and then regretting it because they weren't actually trans. Because they'd realize that's not what's for me. Because they were forced to think about it. But they're not doing that, and they're not going to. So we need to, like, ban it. We need to ban it for under 18, because they're not gonna do any digging. Because they don't care.
No, because there is nothing to dig for.
They don't give a single shit about you. Anyway, that is all I really had to say in this video. And just have an amazing day. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my story.
So it's a very sad story, and I don't think it's over yet, do you? Thank you so much for joining me, Rad Mom, here in my bedroom. Just popping in to say Happy New Year and say that I think it's so important that we continue the work that we're doing. Because a lot of the ideas I think that we talk about here on the channel don't necessarily get touched on other places, because I'm a weirdo and a nerd, and I tend to gather together some pretty disparate threads sometimes. But this one is exactly what I have been saying was going to happen for years. Go back and look at some of my old videos. I have talked about this, that there are going to be young women just like this who have been through the trans mill, if you will, and come out the other side deciding that leftism is not for them. That they're so tired of the word liberal that they can't even associate themselves with it anymore. You know, which bodes ill for the next couple of decades in American politics. Where in the hell are we? We've been stifled. I know that, and which is why I'm starting to think to myself that if I ever do make a TikTok, it's not going to be a RadFem TikTok. I'm going to do something else. I don't know what it would be, but something far more generic and kind of middle of the road and general appeal, and just, you know, assume the RadFem stuff. That you're going to pick up those ideas from watching my material just because that's what I'm going to assume. Right? It's going to be subtext, because the throttling has got to stop. This is ridiculous. That this young woman clearly spends way too much time on TikTok. And did she ever run into any of us? I don't think so. That's terrible. And defeating that shit is why I'm here. So thank you so much for joining me. Please like the video if you did. Subscribe to the channel so we can all work together in the new year to bring feminism back into the real world, because we desperately need it. And yeah, see y'all in 2024. Bye.